Hello, I am Dr. Kayla Eldridge, and I am an advocate for children. I am married to Ron Eldridge, a middle school social studies teacher. We have 3 kids, Juliana, Jackson, and Jace. 2 of our kids have IEPs. And then we have 3 fur babies. Miha is a 17-year-old little 3-pound Yorkie. You can just barely see her right there in the middle of the other 2 dogs. Then we've got Willie, he's our dachshund. He's 10. And then we have Rico, who's a Chihuahua, and he is 6. So I am an educational audiologist turned instructional coach with ambitions to one day lead a special education department. I work at USD 260 or Derby Public Schools. We have about 7,000 students with 9 elementaries, 2 middle schools, a high school. I am currently working at the 2 middle schools for about 1,800 students. I also still work at Wesley Medical Center as an audiologist during the Christmas and the summer break. So today we're going to talk about inclusive school culture. The first thing I will do is review some articles that were helpful in learning about inclusive school culture. And throughout the presentation, be sure to look for these tags that I've got for supportive, equitable, culturally responsive, and inclusive school culture. I'll answer some questions about inclusive schools and just do a reflection over what I've learned. So the first article I'm going to talk about, in 2018, the Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development released an article entitled 7 Ways to Create an Inclusive Classroom Environment. The 7 ways are to, number 1, provide academic support services to ensure all students have the opportunity to thrive. Number 2, have highly trained teachers. They're vital to educating students. Number 3 is having school curriculum to address concepts like privilege, oppression, global power struggles, and racism. 4, many measures have been proposed to integrate student body populations from voluntary transfer programs to redrawing school neighborhood boundaries, but we just need to make sure that we have integrated student bodies. Number 5, adjusting evaluation measurements to take both diversity of student population and intercultural understanding into account. Number 6, have outside of individual classrooms, educators can make sure that they foster an inclusive larger school community for those things outside of the classroom. 7, educators can promote inclusivity by creating environments where students can openly discuss thoughts and feelings about privilege and structural oppression. Next, according to Children Education International in 2021, there are some traits of an inclusive leader that an inclusive leader would possess. Those traits include having a visible commitment, leaders articulating a genuine commitment to diversity, challenge the status quo, hold others accountable, and make diversity and inclusion a personal priority. Having humility, leaders who are modest about capabilities, admit their mistakes, and create the space for others to contribute. We want them to be aware of their biases. We want leaders who show an awareness of personal blind spots and flaws in the system and work hard to ensure the value based on their own abilities. We want them to have curiosity about others. We want the leaders to demonstrate an open mindset and deep curiosity about others, listen without judgment, and seek empathy to understand those around them. We want them to have cultural intelligence. We want them to be attentive to others' cultures and adapt as required. We also want effective collaboration. So leaders that empower others, pay attention to the diversity of thinking and psychological safety, and focus on team cohesion. The next article was written by Heretics in 2019, and she spoke about their 10 reasons we should have inclusive schools. So number 1, we want all children to have equal access to education. Number 2, all children learn alongside their same age peers. Number 3, the focus of education is on the child's abilities and not their disabilities. Number 4, children become accepting and understanding of one another's abilities, talents, personalities, and needs. Number 5, meaningful relationships and friendships develop as students spend quality time with one another. Number 6, students develop confidence in their ability to interact with one another and the world around them. Number 7, teachers in inclusive schools are highly trained and skilled at delivering appropriate, student-centered curriculum through differentiated activities according to their ability level. Number 8, in addition to classroom teachers, students with disabilities are supported by special education teachers, paraprofessionals, and specialists such as speech-language therapists. Number 9, various resources and assistive technologies are available to students in inclusive schools in an effort to reach and teach all learners. And number 10, inclusive schools value input and participation from the whole community, not just the students, so everyone is welcome. The next article was by Future Learn in 2021. The article was entitled, "What is Inclusive Education and How Can You Implement It?" The author first defines inclusive education as a teaching model whereby all students, regardless of their ability, learn together in one environment. They discuss the types of inclusive education, including full inclusion, partial inclusion, or mainstreaming. And they also talked about implementing inclusive education through cooperative learning, specialized training such as for autism or trauma, adapting lessons, using a diverse process to mark papers, and using supplementary aids to complement teaching. The next article by Inclusive Schools in 2021 talked about the principal's roles in having an inclusive school. So what a principal would want to do is review the most important aspects of inclusive education before launching efforts to lead the school through action steps. Number 2 would be to state support clearly and explicitly for an inclusive philosophy and practice across all classrooms in your school in either a faculty meeting or a staff meeting. Number 3, you'd want to assign special education staff to grade level or department teams rather than having disability or program specific teams. Number 4, you want to provide planning time for teacher teams of general and special education educators at the same time. You want to ensure that students are receiving special education services, are participating in on-grade level general curricula, and that all special education teachers receive relevant professional development regarding curriculum with their general education peers. Number 6, they want to communicate the use of appropriate instructional accommodations for any student who requires them. That's an expected instructional delivery activity in every classroom. We want to convene meetings with general and special education teachers to complete the step-by-step learning forms for each student with an IEP to begin staffing process for the next school year. We want to use information to create the schedule of instructional and personal supports for the next school year. We also want to take steps to include students and parents in creating the authentic, inclusive school. And last, we want to provide data snapshots of increases in time students spend in the general education classroom and in achievement, attendance, and graduation so that staff understands that the things that we are doing are working. So we want to celebrate those successes and plan for that continuous improvement. The next article by McIntyre in 2022, she writes about the new viewpoint of inclusion, where we are not only looking at disabilities or learning differences, but also at race, gender, sexual orientation, or any kind of difference. We want all kids to be included, and we don't want them to just have access. We also want them to feel respected, valued, and also encouraged to do well. The next article by the Ministry of Education in New Zealand gives 4 suggestions for developing an inclusive classroom culture. They suggest, number 1, you value each student. Number 2, you establish a respectful classroom climate. Number 3, make a plan for everyone to participate and to achieve. And number 4, take a community approach. Next article the video by the National Association of Secondary School Principals was titled Building an Inclusive School Culture with Equity of Access to Knowledge. The best practices for achieving equity of access to knowledge were given. The best practices are: understanding and supporting deficits will eliminate excuses, raise every student beyond their own expectations, customize your school programs for each student, and collaborate to find solutions using culture to support. Next, Open Society Foundations in 2019 talks about inclusive education being achieved with just a few basic elements. They're having teaching assistants or specialists, having inclusive curriculum, and having parental involvement. The next article talked about a school in Wisconsin where the principal said that they wanted inclusivity, so they went with a radical idea. They wanted nothing separate, which meant no special places or special teachers for students. And the way that they did that was by having the kids learn alongside each other in classrooms with co-teachers. This also made it so that it wasn't a financial burden on the school. The next article by Team XQ talks about what we gain and why inclusion matters. So students gain social and community skills. They also have fewer absences and behavioral issues in inclusive schools. Inclusive schools also lead to greater overall acceptance and tolerance in the community. And all students and teachers benefit from a great support system. I'm going to pause here and go to a video 2.